I think on a bipartisan basis, the recognition that if we're going to address our current economic malaise or much lower and slower growth than we would like to see at this particular point in time in our economy, regulatory reform has to be an essential component of that, along with tax reform and budget reform, and particularly entitlement reform. And so I appreciate your contribution to all that. I want to state that, you know, the panel here is kind of weighted toward the medical device issue. And I enjoy co-chairing that caucus with my colleagues from Minnesota on medical devices. Rather than be repetitive, let me just say Indiana says ditto to everything that Senator Klobuchar has said and Congressman Paulson has said relative to medical devices. We have a big stake at that in Indiana, and it is one of the most, no pun intended, cutting-edge industries in our state, providing a glimpse into the future of the kind of technology innovation that we can accomplish here in the United States. And we don't want to have to see that shipped overseas on the basis of an egregious tax or failure to bring about some sensible regulations. Secondly, I also want to just note for the record, and this is pretty startling. I don't know that you need to comment on this, but the Small Business Administration, the government's Small Business Administration, a few years ago estimated that the cost of complying with federal regulations exceeded $1.75 trillion every year, nearly 12% of the total GDP. Now, that's only half right. We're looking at a staggering cost here. And so the application of impact analysis and sound examination of how we go forward before we regulate is extremely important. I want to just ask a couple of questions. Dr. Elliger, I'll submit this to you. On your, you know, the buzz of the day is the President's announcement yesterday relative to moving forward on climate control initiatives. And this, of course, has a dramatic effect on regulations coming out of the EPA. What measurements and analysis have you done, if anything, of any, relative to EPA, and will you be, or do you have any thoughts at this particular point as to where this agency would fall in terms of regulatory impact, sound regulatory impact analysis? Too often, I think, ideology tends to drive agency regulatory decisions as opposed to sound analysis. I'm not trying to make a political point here. I'm just simply saying if we're going to address these problems, we need to be more rational and more scientifically oriented in terms of making some of these decisions. So do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, in the regulatory report card, the environmental regulations actually often tend to rank in about the top half. But what that's telling us, since the average is about, the average score is about 50%, what that's telling us is that the EPA, Department of Energy, some of the other entities that issue environmental regulations have made an investment in regulatory impact analysis and are producing documents and are at least, you know, trying to appear to comply, in comparison with some other agencies where you read the regulatory impact analysis and you say, they're not even trying. So sometimes they're some of the better ones, but even the better ones aren't that great. So it's maybe a more complicated answer than, you know, they're great or they're lousy. You know, comparatively, there are some good examples. Yeah, but the best ones still aren't that great.
Yeah. Well, this recent announcement by the President that he's going to use the regulatory process to achieve what a lot of us think needed to be legislated, nevertheless, it's going to have enormous impact on energy costs in this country. And so I think a sound analysis, to the extent it can be provided for us as we examine how to go forward and address this, could be very helpful to us. I think the impact of this is going to transcend the impact of a lot of regulations that have come down and for states that it'll particularly be relevant to different states depending on their the source of energy that they supply to their people. I think my time is about expired, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you, Senator. Representative Hanna?